Good morning and welcome. You're listening live to Heart, a program which aims to help you understand and to become your loving self. I'm Dr. Mitra Rashidian. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sexologist. My office and my practice is located in beautiful Encino, California.
And I'm Dr. Robert Jaffe. I am the partner of Dr. Rashidian. I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified hypnotherapist, and we're here to welcome you to Heart, a program which aims to help you discover and become your loving, authentic, true self.
Yes, and we are here at KMET Live, and we would like to, encourage you to join us, to call us and let us know what you think first of all about this program. What would you like to hear about, so that we can offer you more of what you want. And also we would like for you to ask us questions, comments, and aside from this program, you can watch us on our YouTube. The address is heart-to-heart.online/YouTube. And then we have archive section as well that at KMET, which you're welcome to go there and visit them and review them as many times as you wish. And today we have good news for you. Oh, by the way, I didn't announce the phone number. Okay, so if you want to call us, you need to know the phone number, obviously, right? And that is 951-922-3532. 951-922-3532. So, Dr. Jaffe,
Yes.
Would you like to announce the good news?
The good news is that we are now doing a second show here on KMET. We're excited about it. It's going to be every Thursday afternoon from 3 to 4 p.m. And the show is going to be focused on sex and sexuality and how to not how to have sex. We assume that that's a biological function. Most of us know how to have sex.
Nature will take care of that automatically. Right?
But we're going to be talking about getting in the mood, and we're going to be talking about barriers to good sex and how to overcome them. And we're excited to talk about that, especially since that is Dr. Rashidian's field of expertise, and she has a lot to say about it. And
I hope so.
yeah, and we look forward to seeing you there.
Yes, and then part of that primarily is the focus of sexual health on relationships, and so it's going to be covering a wide area of our lives. Basically, as we know, human sexuality is a core part of our life, and that's something that cannot be ignored, disregarded, or downsized. And the more we know about our sexuality, the more healthy and happy relationships and communications method we have with each other.
Absolutely.
And that starts even with our children. So it's going to be a fun topic, and in particular, if you're going to be stuck in traffic, I think listening to that program will be kind of joyful and cheerful, I hope.
Well, I think probably at this point they're not going to be stuck.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's very little traffic. But
yeah.
while you're speeding along, hopefully under 100 miles an hour, as we now know, the highway patrol is out getting hundreds and thousands of people who are going over 100 because there's no traffic, and everybody is so excited to have a free freeway that we are actually zooming along and getting pulled over and have to pay through our wallets.
Right, somehow zooming these days is very popular, but zooming in the freeways is not really a good thing to do, right? You can zoom in other areas of life, but not in the speed part.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yes.
So
we want to also say that how that's gonna divide the two programs, Dr. Jaffe, right?
Right. So today we're going to be talking more about communication, but starting next Friday, we're going to focus more on addictions.
Right.
And we're going to talk about what addictions are, where they originate, and how people can know when they're addicted, and what the pros and cons are of addiction. Yes, there are some pros, there are some benefits to it, but but there's certainly some cons, and we want to explain all of that to you, and also help you understand if you are caught in an addiction and it is hurting you, how to free yourself.
Exactly. So the main theme between the two programs, the focus primarily, no matter what we talk about, whether it's about human sexuality or it is about addictions, these two major topics of life include the function of ego, includes communication skills, and includes knowing our authentic true self.
Mm-hmm.
So within both programs, we're going to make references to this. So pretty much the theme of the programs is going to be, as you have heard it before during the past few weeks, and then it's just the topic will shift from one program to the next one, but the main themes are going to stay the same. So for those of you who have been interested in about lose your ego, find yourself, and authentic true self, and communication skills, those are going to be perfectly there. And this is how we're going to focus on different aspects of sexuality and addictions with respect to ego functioning, authentic true selves, and improving communication skills.
Absolutely. So we have a quote of the day, and I'm going to read it to you. And this quote is from Elizabeth Navarre Finley. Yeah, Elizabeth Navarre Finley. I guess she was in a book or a story called Little Big Hearts. I haven't heard of her before, but I really came across this quote and I like it. So here it is. Never rely on rewards and punishment to promote altruistic behavior. Both tactics send the wrong messages. That kindness is a commodity that can be bought or bartered. In the end, a loving support and good example are a person's best lesson in the art of compassion.
Excellent. Wow, that's so powerful.
Yeah. Basically, what she's saying here is that we need to focus on our loving, authentic, true self. Dr. Rashidian was just commenting on the ego. There's two parts to a human being. There's our ego, and then there's our spirit, or our soul, or our heart. You can say whatever of those you wish. And the ego is all about me, and the soul is all about love and connection, and believing that we are all together.
Exactly.
So, and those two parts are all part of being human. We can't eliminate the ego, nor should we try, but we can learn how to moderate the ego so that the ego isn't running us in a lot of situations where it's detrimental to us.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what Elizabeth Neville Finley says.
Well, we appreciate, her quote, and we are going to be benefiting from that today. And I hope that you find it useful and focus on the kindness and the compassion, because after all, that's what we ultimately need, in particular during rough times, difficult times, isolated times, as we are experiencing them currently, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we hear good news here and there. We also hear that we still need to be patient and wait longer, and look to other avenues that they're going to be opening shortly and soon, in order to help us have a safe gathering again and go back to what was our prior normal, which I love it and I miss it tremendously.
Absolutely.
I had a talk with my daughter last night, and she was saying that if she can, ever come back to California again. And that kind of was heartbreaking, to hear that. And so we talked for the longest time over the phone, And I told her, I'm sure that that's going to happen soon, sooner than later. For now, she is best to focus on how she can take care of herself and be safe, and then we are safe, and that's what's really matter for now. Safety, not being exposed to the coronavirus, and then just be grateful for what we have self-compassion, self-love, and then things are going to happen in a good way.
Right. So, last week we were talking about speaking, talking, and listening. Excuse me. And we talked a little bit about talking and some of the rules and different styles of communication. We talked about 3 different styles of communication, and the healthiest style being collaborative communication. And we talked about how to create some of that. So, and again, you can go back to our archives and listen to our show last week if you missed it. Today we're going to be talking a little more about communication and on the listening side. And so the first rule of listening is when you listen to understand. And why is that important? Because a lot of people listen to agree or to disagree. So if you're listening to agree or to disagree, then as soon as the other person is talking and saying something that you don't agree with, you stop listening. And at that point, you shut off, and then you either interrupt and you want to state your opinion, or you are, quote, polite, but you're still not listening to them. You're sort of patiently waiting until they're through so you can make your point.
Right.
And so the goal is to really listen to understand, and then also to find the points of agreement first, so that the other person will feel validated that they are not crazy, and that they do have some validity in what they're saying. It doesn't mean that you have to be in agreement with them in the totality, but there may be some things that they're saying that you can agree with. And if the other person hears you agreeing, then they're going to put down their defenses and be more open to listening to your point of view.
This is such an important topic, and I can come up with a few real examples of my own, experiences with my clients that, we're going to share about them after our commercial break, which is coming up next. And so, yes, listening by itself, it's an art.
Mm-hmm.
And without this art, communication can become disconnected.
Absolutely.
So more of this right after our commercial break.
And here we go.
Welcome back from our commercial break. This is Dr. Mitra and Dr. Robert at Heart to Heart. For those who just tuning into our program, welcome. And to recap, our discussion for this segment is about communication and the listening part of it. And those who are listening to Heart to Heart at KMET, we encourage you to call in and ask questions. The phone number at the station is 951-922-3532. And then you can also visit us on our YouTube at heart-to-heart.online/YouTube. And then for the archive sections, you can go Google SoundCloud KMET 1490, go to playlist and check on Heart to Heart, and you can see our archive program. And we do welcome questions, comments, because this is how we know what you want, what you're interested in to hear. And also, your contribution helps so many other people to benefit from your questions, those who share the same concerns. So we thank you for sharing your hour with us, and we are going to go back to our discussion of listening as an art in communication.
Absolutely. So right before the break, we were talking about listening to understand. And if you listen to understand, the beauty about that is, guess what? You might learn something. You might learn
Indeed.
something. None of us knows everything, although the ego tries to make us believe that we know everything, but we don't. And it's okay to have opinions, but the key is to really get to the truth. And so one of the keys in communication is to be more committed to the truth than you are to making your point. And I want to say that again. One of the big keys to communication is to be more committed to the truth than to making your point.
Right, and for example of that is that I hear in my couples therapy when, in particular, female partners, they say, "I want to be heard,"
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's such a meaningful, powerful statement that one makes, right? I want to be heard. So in that is not included, I want to be judged, I want to be corrected, I want to be told what to do, I want to how to be better, how to be worse, whether my statement is accurate or it's not accurate, whether it's valid or it's not valid. I just want to be heard, right?
Right.
It plain, simple explanation of how one's feeling is about not being heard, right?
Correct. Correct. And why is it so important to be heard? And the answer to that is because to be heard is to have you valued.
Right.
When someone is heard, they feel like, oh, the other person cares enough about me to try to understand what I'm saying and to try to understand why I'm saying it.
Exactly. Right.
So really listening to someone is a statement that I value you and I care about you. And unfortunately, a lot of communication over the past several years has been more about, do I agree or not agree? And if I don't agree, that means that I'm right and you're wrong. And then we get into an argument over who's right and who's wrong, and we take sides. And as we were talking about last week, that is not a productive way of communicating. It's not a productive way of communicating in business. It's not a productive way of communicating in politics. And it's especially not a productive way of communicating in close relationships or intimate relationships.
Exactly, because when we are listening, but primarily we are focusing on how to correct, how to judge, how to adjust and all of that, how to make myself right and win the argument, win the discussions. One of the biggest aspects of communication is kind of not being paid attention to, and that's the feelings behind the explaining of what's going on inside the person. Right. So when that feeling aspect is not recognized and is not paid attention to, already we don't have a healthy communication going on. For example, in one of my couples, the lady was really complaining and she was hurtful about a given situation that she experienced, and her partner was totally clueless about what she was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I invite them to imagine this, that she's a player on the screen, and then the husband is sitting in an audience role,
Mm-hmm.
right? And just to listening to the story of this woman and not thinking that she's related to him or they have something going on, just be an unbiased audience and let the player tell her a story.
And what you're saying is so important, because what you're really saying is, hey, get your ego out of it.
Right.
Right?
And then I said, if you don't have, like you said, your ego, which I told him, if you don't have your judgment and the urge to correct her and to tell her no, she's wrong about you and all of that, what do you just hear?
Mm-hmm.
And then he had to actually pause for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, I'm hearing a woman that she's really suffering.
Suffering.
And I said, yeah,
Yeah.
And that's the point. That's the point that you're not hearing
Right.
her suffering,
Right.
and whether her story is valid in your opinion or not. This is her experience.
Mm-hmm.
Her experience is that she's suffering, and she wants for you to know that she's suffering.
Right.
And then for the first time, he just said, "Oh my God,"
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And it was like he melted like a huge ice cube. He just melted down,
Mm-hmm.
and burst into tears and said, "I never could even imagine something like that."
Mm-hmm.
And then that was a big ice breaking, in their therapy. And so we see that when we just put all of our, like you said, ego, which is totally, sums it all up in a nice way, when we put that ego aside and not make it about, I need to be right, I need to be right, I need to be right, then we see that how we can actually hear the suffering part of ourselves.
Yes.
And respond to that and validate that for the first time.
Yes. And so a lot of people may be thinking to themselves as they're listening to us, well, isn't it important to state your view, and if you think you're right, to assert yourself? And we are certainly not saying that it's not important to state your view. And one of the other keys to communication is to substitute the but for an and. So it doesn't have to be an either or. There are many things that are going on in communication where the other person, not only, we call it content communication, and then we also call it process or meta communication. The content is what you're talking about.
The story.
The story. You could be talking about any story. You could be talking about space travel. You could be talking about your day at work. You could be talking about a baseball game. That's the content. But then when you're talking with another person that you care about, there's also the feelings, and that's the meta communication. So how do you feel about what you're saying? And the key in intimate communication is to understand the feeling part of it as well as the content part of it. And when you let the other person know, like you were just giving the example of the woman who was suffering, if he could say to her, I hear that you're really suffering, or I can feel you're suffering, that would be such a long way, in such a gift to her.
Right.
If she could recognize that he was really getting that part of the communication.
Whether that's the assumption that she's suffering, whether that's real or
Yes.
made up, that's secondary to just acknowledging the person's suffering at the moment.
Yes. So if he says, I hear you how much you're suffering, and she says, well, no, I'm not really suffering, but I am feeling strongly about this.
Right.
Then he would learn more about her. He would say, oh, I guess I was a little off in that guess, but I do want to understand. Oh, so this is something you feel strongly about. Tell me more. Tell me why you feel so strongly about it.
Yes.
And then instead of trying to listen to rebut it, he would be listening to try to understand her perception and based on her life. Everybody comes to the world with their own life perceptions and life experiences, and everything that we say gets filtered through that. And one person's life experiences is theirs, and another's is theirs. And so nobody's going to have exactly the same life experiences.
Right, and that's the learning we're talking about when we listen to each other.
Right.
Right, that's the depth of learning that we're not just looking about learning new topics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though learning about each other's feelings and perspective is a essential topic, but listening to each other so we can understand where we're coming from, our perceptions, how our belief system kind of filters the reality of what's going on. These are all essential part of communication. So when we say listening is an art, that's the art part of it, learning about each other and learning about yourself within a given relationship.
Right. So the one thing we're going to leave you with today is listening to understand, rather than listening to agree or disagree, and also to change the but into an and.
Right.
Right. So.
Well, I just learned something about you.
What is that?
When you and I talk or when you and I write, you use lots of ands. Now I know why you do that. I always ask myself, what makes you use so many ands, right? Okay, all right. So you see, so that's, there you go. That's a perfect example. I just got my own aha moment here, right?
Yes, yes. Because again, what the other person is saying is there's usually a truth to. It may not be the whole truth. Actually, one of my favorite books is The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. I want to recommend it to all of my listeners right now.
Such a powerful, powerful book.
And in it, he says, "Say not, I have found the truth. Say instead, I have found a truth."
Right.
Because there are many truths, and many of them are on the surface contradictory.
Right.
For example, are we all living or are we all dying? Are we all living or are we all dying? And we are both, right?
Yes.
From the moment of birth, we move close to our death. We don't know when that is. It may be this second, it may be in 10 years, but we're moving toward our death, so therefore we are all dying. But it doesn't change the fact that we are all living, right? So when you say not, I have found the truth, I have found a truth, you're listening to the part of what your partner or your friend or what your colleague is saying, that you can say, yes, I can agree with that. And here's another piece that maybe you haven't said or maybe you haven't thought of that I think is important.
Yes, and that learning part brings out curiosity about each other. Oh wow, honey, I had no idea that you feel that way or you think that way. So I'm interested to know more about what made you, think that way or feel that way that you do. And then also learning about yourself, that how did I contribute to that, or how my lack of communication skill or my lack of inability to be able to listen without trying to correct and trying to keep myself in a safe position didn't allow me to learn about myself. And now not only I'm learning about you, I'm learning about me.
Right.
Right. And that's mutual learning about each other. It's an icebreaker in communication.
Correct. And then I want to say a second rule that this is a rule that I'm thinking of that I think is important. And that rule is how much do you value kindness in yourself and your communications? Do you wish to be kind? Because to me, kindness is right next to godliness. That what we want is we want to be kind to other people, because being kind is a statement of love and value and caring. And someone once said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. But they can't feel you're caring if there's no kindness in the way you're delivering your message. So this is something that has sort of been lost over the past few years, where we don't want to be kind. We want to win the argument, and that may be at the cost of alienating the other person. We have lost that kindness, and I think it's so important for us to bring it back in all areas of life, but especially in our intimate relationships.
So that's such a important point. I guess to understand how this has happened, is important. If you know how we lost the touch of kindness, the art of kindness, then we can stop doing what we're doing and then take a different direction towards recovery from being unkind to ourselves. Exactly.
And then when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about why people aren't kind and why people do insist on rightness. And I think that's important to look at.
Absolutely. So more of this. Please join us in a short few minutes. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
For now. So, welcome back from our commercial break. This is Heart to Heart at KMET live. Dr. Mitra and Dr. Robert are here. And then, for those of you who just joined us, please call us with your comments and questions. 951-922-3532. You can also visit us at our YouTube program, heart-2-heart.online/YouTube, or you can go to a playlist on KMET and look at our archive programs. We are talking about the art of listening as part of communication, and also, so I let Dr. Robert take over because you were going to say something about a different part of it.
Yeah, well, at the end of our last segment, I said, let's talk a little bit about why do people say things in an unkind way, and why are people so quick to argue? And I think, part of our philosophy here at Heart to Heart is that there's two parts of the human being, as I said earlier. There's our ego, and then there's our heart, or our spirit, or our soul. And the ego part of us is the part of us that's in charge of staying alive and protecting our bodies. And everything that's alive, animals, I should say, have an ego, and the ego is all about survival. So when we were developing as human beings, we didn't have survival down pat. We don't have it down pat now, but we have more. It's easier in general to survive, to get by, than it used to be, because we don't have to do everything ourselves. We have a society which creates for us. We can turn the faucet on and we have water. We don't have to go to the well. We don't have to build our own toilet in the fields. We don't have to grow our own food. So in a sense, a lot of our survival needs are taken care of. But the ego is about survival. And so what the ego has done is, because its job is survival, is as we've matured as a species and move forward, and physical survival isn't as pressing for a lot of us, not for all of us, but for a lot of us, our ego has then taken over into the mind realm, where we now believe that emotionally, if we feel validated and are right, the ego says, oh, now I get to survive.
Right, and that's such an important insight.
Yes.
As how our mind has shifted, the focus of our ego has shifted from physical survival
to emotional survival.
Yes.
As though, and I'm going to say as though, because it isn't accurate, but as though if you're wrong, you're not going to survive.
Right.
And this is something that's lodged deep in our unconscious minds.
Right.
This is something that all of us have inside of us. Some of us are run by it, and others have learned how to deal with it in a way that it's not quite so powerful within us. But whenever we feel like we're wrong about something, that part of us inside that is about survival starts to kick up and say, uh-oh, am I in danger now? Because I'm wrong about this. And it doesn't have to be anything big. It could be, hey, honey, you forgot to get the bread. Thanks for shopping and getting everything, but you forgot to get the bread. And all of a sudden, the honey, whether it's a man or a woman, is starting to feel a little bit anxious. And what is that anxiety? That anxiety is, uh-oh, I was wrong. I goofed. I made a mistake. And at that moment, they can then become defensive, as though they have to make an excuse, or they have to say, but I got everything else. Aren't I good about that? and try to change the subject. They're going to try to diffuse it. And that, like I said, that's in every human being. We all have that inside of us because we all have ego. And what gets in the way of loving communication is that ego part of us that feels as though if we're wrong, we're not going to survive.
Right.
It's not a conscious thought. It's not we're thinking we're not going to survive. It's we're feeling uncomfortable. We're feeling uneasy. And so then we have to prove that we're still worthy, that we're still going to be a valid person and worthy of survival. And so we argue. And that to me is the key to why people aren't kind to each other, is because they're so focused on being right that they lose focus on the loving, caring connection that the spirit wants to bring into the world just as much as the ego wants to survive.
And that's important to know that when we go into the emotional surviving mode and feeling danger, and we develop negative skills, I would say, or unkind skills. It's a better word, I think, maybe. To defend ourselves, to be judgmental, to criticize others, so that I can stay safe. There is a high cost to that, and that high cost is the fear that's been generated as a result of all that activities. If I don't criticize, if I don't judge, then I'm going to be hurt or I'm going to be harmed. And then the associated anxiety that comes with that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then each and every one of us have learned somehow to take care of our anxiety without even knowing that we are experiencing anxiety. And some of that activities are like eating unconditionally, eating when we are not hungry, right?
Right.
So, or doing other choices like addictions, right? Reaching for cigarette, reaching for porn, reaching for something that can give us a temporary, a few minutes or a few seconds of joy, so that we don't feel our anxiety.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So as we see, the rate of anxiety during the past decade has significantly increased. And this is exactly one of the main reasons as to how that has happened. Even though our society, in terms of technology, in terms of growth, is moving forward significantly and also at a very fast pace. At the same time, fear of not making it, fear of not being good enough, fear of not being adequate enough has increased significantly. And this is all emotional, pain and ego survival emotionally that takes us to the place of fear, anxiety, anger, increased suicide, increased rate of addiction, increased rate of physical illnesses such as hypertension, diabetes, cancer, etc. And we even see that in our children. We never had adult illnesses among children, but now we do.
Yes. So I love what you just said, and I think what you said, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important for our listeners to recognize that we feel, when people are criticizing us, we feel as though we're being attacked.
Right.
The truth.
Well, some of them are attacking anyway.
Well, yeah. I mean, yes. If they're actually the energy can be an attacking energy.
Right.
Yes. So the energy is attacking if the other person is trying to make us feel bad about ourselves. That's an attacking energy. However, if the person is simply criticizing what we're saying and not attacking us as a person, oftentimes we feel as though we're being attacked, whereas actually the person is simply disagreeing with us.
So that's again, we're going back to the art of listening.
The art of listening, but also the ego wanting to be right misinterprets criticism as an attack.
Right.
and then goes into defend and attack mode on its own.
Right.
And now we're in an argument over who's right and who's wrong, rather than a collaboration of, well, perhaps you have a point here, and perhaps I have a point there, and maybe we can put our points together and come up with a truth that's more valid than either one of us could do on our own.
So I guess the first step to art of listening is to just not be defensive and catch ourselves if we are becoming defensive, and then allow the person to finish whatever they want to say without us wanting to correct them, judge them, refuse what they say, and try to find a safe place for ourselves within the content of that conversation, right? If we are able to catch ourselves that we're doing this, not only we're allowing time, ample time for the speaker to finish their conversation and to say what they want to say. Once we hear all of that, we can actually see, that conversation, even though it could be pointed at us, we can see a dynamic that the person is living in.
Yes.
And then to see, okay, now I can better position myself in that dynamic because now I have the full picture.
Correct.
Or I have a better picture or more insightful picture of what's going on in my partner's viewpoint, right?
Right.
And then acknowledge that the person has, has found a dynamic to talk, it is important, right? And then we need to decide, how do I want to position myself in that argument, and how much of me being defensive or try to correct or try to explain myself is going to be helpful. And then if I can't do that, maybe that's the time that I need to ask for help, professional help.
Right. Or to say to yourself, is what I'm about to say going to add to the conversation in a way that's positive, that's helpful, and that's enlightening? So if what I'm going to say is simply going to be arguing my point without acknowledging your point, then probably we're going to end up fighting with each other. And what's wrong with fighting with each other? Well, we're more interested in proving our point than in learning anything.
Exactly, and we're going to go back to the square one where we started the argument and nothing has been achieved. So the point is, even when we listen without anything, that's a step forward to art of listening and be, a good listener and not make the story about us, but understand it as a reflection of who the person is and what they're going through, and have an acknowledgement, a kind acknowledgement for that. So we are getting towards the end of our program, and we want to again remind you to please join us next Thursday at 3 o'clock. We're having our first episode of our second show. Right?
Yes.
And it is going to be about sex and sexuality and relationship and communication, of course. And ego is going to be a part of it. Authentic true self is going to be a part of it. Our sexuality is going to be a part of it. And it's not going to be about how to have sex, but it's going to be about how you find yourself within the sexual context of our lives, and also, how to appreciate that, how to recognize that, how to value that, and how to be your own authentic, loving, sexual self.
Yeah. And so the last thing I'm going to do right now is I'm going to read the quote of the day one more time, because we love the part of us, the part that likes quotes. And this is from Elizabeth Navarre Finley. Little Big Heart, I guess, is the book that she wrote. And she said, never rely on rewards and punishment to promote altruistic behavior. Both tactics send the wrong message. That kindness is a commodity that can be bought or bartered. In the end, loving support and good example are a person's best lesson in the art of compassion.
Exactly. So the art of compassion and listening, is a part of a compassionate self and being compassionate towards each other. without having that compassionate side of us, we're not going to be able to relate to each other. And once we do that, as a matter of fact, we're allowing our compassionate part to grow, to be known about, to be acknowledged, and to be supported, to be valued, to be loved. And through that exchange of compassionate communication and listening, we are going to be able to fix so many, scars in our lives. And don't forget that until the next time, all you need is love.
All you need
See
is
you
love.
Thursday.
See you next Thursday and Friday. Bye bye.
Bye bye.